Okay, I welcome our audience. I have here John Hernandez. We are at the CAAA Winter Convention 2022, January 2022, here in beautiful Rancho Mirage. My guest is John Hernandez. John, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
John, you've got quite the introduction that you could give, so why don't you just give the shortest version of that?
I'm an applicant's attorney, a former workers' compensation judge at the LA board, and before that I was a defense attorney, so I am workers' comp. I'm a CLA board member, part of Latino Comp, and I do everything I can to educate and represent.
Great, man. Yeah, last time we talked was really good. That was 2 years ago.
It's hard to believe.
I know.
It's nice to be out here and seeing familiar faces, not just on social media, and talking to people and shaking hands or bumping fists or whatever it is people are comfortable with. And so I appreciate being here.
Yeah, for sure. Last time we talked, there was we talked about kind of your heart for the fight. And I put that in one of the questions, I've heard that maybe there's two types of people that roll out of bed ready for a fight, and then everybody else.
I roll out of bed angry. unless it's Saturday or Sunday, right? Yeah. Other than that, I roll out of bed ready to go. I mean, we're busy. Even in these COVID times, there's still court hearings, whether they're by telephone or trials or depositions, and I think all the applicants, attorneys out there, we're doing everything we can to make sure that even in these circumstances, we're doing what we need to do to represent our clients, which can be a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, you do other things. I mean, it's obviously first noble, just the representation. They need it. We know that they need it, but you're invested in the community. You do things that are a little bit above and beyond, I'd say, than a lot of your contemporaries. And I just wanted to recognize that and tell you I appreciate that. And that's probably part of that fight, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our kids are growing up in our communities, and one thing is work and one thing is where we live, and that's why I do Rotary or whatever those other things that I need to make sure that my kids see me as an example and the community sees as an example that we all got to do something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we should at least try.
Yeah. Well, you're an example, man. I appreciate that. So I had some unique questions for you, and I hope that you could tell me you could tell me these are terrible questions, or tell me I'm not qualified to answer that. But I'm really kind of curious from your perspective as a previous judge. For one, what are the challenges and changes that the WCB has gone through, and then what does that look like, long term?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's something that I've discussed with many people, other attorneys, judges, former colleagues of mine, current judges, and I think what we're seeing is a little bit of a burnout on behalf of the judges. They're overwhelmed, they're understaffed. They they have to manage these, I like to call like the old day party lines, if you remember those, right? And so manage personalities on the phone, and then do their own clerical work. And it can get very monotonous and tedious. I mean, even when I'm on the phone, if I'm having to wait, if I'm lucky and I have a judge who's going alphabetically last name, and I have an A, B, or C last name, it's great. Otherwise, I can be on the phone an hour and a half, 2 hours waiting for my case to be called. And that's just me, a couple of days a week. You're a judge, a line judge, doing that in and out. It gets very tiring. And several of them that I've talked to have said, this is not what I signed up for, and are not interested in doing it, and are taking early retirements and whatnot. But that's tough for us as well, because we start losing experienced line judges, and I don't have a lot of experience with the newer judge, but that's what they are, newer judges. I was a new judge at one point. I understand what that's like, but you don't have the same kind of feel for a judge that you would have had normally being able to go to their courtroom and observe them, observe their demeanor and interact with them than you do now. Now they're just a name and a voice on the other side of a line if you're lucky. And so it's a challenge, because that really puts us in where do we want to be venued, where what's going to happen with this situation. And now that the courts went back into lockdown again, we're not even getting our clients in trials in front of judges, which is extremely important, at least according to according to John, right? I think when you're trying to gauge credibility of somebody, somebody who's complaining of pain, of just the difficulties they're experiencing in life, that's really hard to capture by telephone or capture by video even.
Yeah, you talked about that last time.
And so it's even more so now. Now we're actually seeing the impact.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and the impact being, first off, judge fatigue is kind of what you're feeling. I think I could see it affecting succession planning too, like you said, when you were a young judge, having the availability to watch these folks work.
That was very nice, sitting in a courtroom, learning, watching other people, interacting with other judges. There's not, from what I understand, there's some of that, but there's definitely not what it was like before the pandemic, and people have adjusted. But, really the toll, I think, is being taken on the injured workers because, they're not being given the benefit. And we were just learning actually in this conference examples of people who have gone to trial via video and judges saying things like, I just didn't believe your client, via the video, but on appeal, there was a different story. So it's an interesting dynamic, one that we have to adjust to and deal with. But, again, like it seems like everything else, who bears the brunt of it? The injured worker.
Sadly. Yeah. What changes do you how are they adjusting? Obviously they care. Everybody care. I mean, we have to give benefit of the doubt that.
Absolutely. I think everybody, there's always outliers in whatever profession you want to talk about, right? But I do believe in the, 25 years that I've been involved in workers' comp, that whether you're on the defense side or you're on the judge or whether you're on the applicant side, people care. Their integrity is important. The delivery of the benefits is important. And we have to advocate for our clients on whichever side that you're from. But, there's a lot of commonplace that can be found, a lot of compromise that can be found. And I think it's one of those things where we're working harder at it, but because of the challenges we have with getting people just out of their comfort zone to leave their house to go to a medical appointment, or I was chatting with one of the doctors today that we use often as a primary treating physician. Excellent doctor, excellent staff, but they're dealing with the challenges of isolation and people calling in sick and having to cancel appointments, and so it's just delay. And nobody likes delay. Delay is bad for the injured worker. Yeah. Delay is bad for the carriers. Yeah. Delay is bad for the courts. And so we try to roll with the punches. But I just don't see an end very soon. That's not at least this year that we can really start normalizing things, especially as we come back into this shutdown. I don't see that we're ever going to go back to what we were before. I think there's been a permanent shift and change. What it's going to look like, that I don't know yet, but I don't think we ever go back to regular conference hearings live in court. I just don't think that that's something that's going to happen for reasons other than COVID, just the pragmatic portion of the state saving money on not having to have all this real estate, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just things like that. But we do what we can to push, and people are pushing. So that's the important part.
Yeah, we're hearing we do. Interaction with the DWC and staffing is a hot topic. I mean, we call it the Great Recession. Gemini has been fortunate to have pretty good recruiting, and I'm sure it's hurting you though. You're feeling recruiting and finding good people, but I know that the state is severely hurting. We're hearing it directly from many people.
Yeah, I mean, you're in Sacramento, right? You're based there, so you have your ear at, on the pulse of what's going on in the government and what people are happening more than we do here. We kind of get the impact of what's going on, but it's very, very telling. We've seen some major players in workers' comp, all of a sudden go away. Whether it's support services or attorneys, it's just where we are, and how we come out of it is going to be interesting. The laws that have come into play now, the new regulations, the things that have been instituted, have been what seems to be more in order to kind of appease and make things more efficient, but not necessarily that's going to improve the delivery of benefits to the injured worker. So
That's tough. That's tough. Yeah. Do you see does WCB the vision? You know what? I mean, there's got to be hope. I'm sure there is hope. But you know, what do you feel like is going to be changing with the court?
I'm not going to obviously speak for what the WCAB is doing or not. I do know and I do feel that, as you said earlier, they care, they're listening,
right,
and they're trying to do everything they can within their resources. At the end of the day, we go back to the argument, isn't workers' comp a self-funded system from all the premium money that we get from all the different insurance companies? Why are we having financial problems, or if we are, I don't know. But it seems like, they're struggling to keep people or even recruit people. And I don't know if that's just a temperament of society right now as a whole, that they're just kind of got adjusted to this COVID thing, or if it's just really people are not interested in doing government work. I don't know. But I think they're doing what they can. I know that, for example, the commissioner spoke today about hiring a bunch of new lawyers to help expedite the backlog of the cases that have been taken up for further study, but have been sitting up there for months. So they're aware of the problem, and I think that they really want to address it and make it better for everybody. How long that takes and what that looks like, who knows?
Yeah. How though has this changed your practice?
Well, my practice, it was very interesting when I and I may have talked about this before, when I decided to step down from the bench to do this work, I decided I would take a very technologically forward position. And so I immediately went to the cloud-based management. I went to the voice over internet telephones. I instituted Slack, a lot of other tech features. And so when the time came, it was a very easy transition for me because I didn't have paper files, I didn't have phones I needed to move. So other than I'm saving a lot more money on rental space because I was able to downsize, we've been pretty efficient. The main adjustment has been I just really don't see clients in the office very often. And quite frankly, a lot of my clients, they don't want to come. They don't want to drive in. They're happy to do it by phone or they're happy to do it by video. And if we do have a client, I'm much more on the you need to be vaxxed if you want to come into my office or show me a negative test, because I have some people that are full-time in the office that are high risk, and I'm not going to risk my people, over somebody else. So if I'm going to bring clients to the office, they need to show me negative tests or they need to show me vaccine.
Yeah, that's clear. Yeah, and that's great. I mean, it's obvious what we're experiencing too, just in the market, seeing law firms that were prepared technologically, night and day. Yeah, night and day.
I imagine that you see that those that I hear about it, people are like, oh, I still have paper files and I don't know, I can't. That's a hard transition, So for me, I was lucky that I didn't have to transition because that's where I started.
That's where you started.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, smart, man, very smart. Yeah. So how though do you think that these changes in the last couple of years with COVID and the stay at home, how do you think that's affected case outcomes? Specifically, like case duration. I mean, we talked about that a little bit. Yeah. What settlements, care.
It's interesting. I at one point, I remember years ago, I went to a judge's training, and we had a representative from DIR talk about when the RAND study was done and all the major reforms were done in 2004, how they came up with the, for example, 2-year rule for the TD cap. And that was based on a study that, my understanding, that RAND had done, that the average lifespan of a workers' compensation claim from date of injury to settlement was 25 months on average.
Okay.
And so I have to believe that at this point that average has gone up, especially with the closure. Whether we straighten the line again and go back to that, I think we're getting closer. Initially, I would say right at the peak of the shutdown in March of 2020, between that year that followed, things were rough. Nothing seemed to be happening.
Yeah.
But things are picking up the pace in terms of how efficient the judges have become in approving settlements. So we're not having, at least I don't believe we're having that problem anymore. I mean, there's just little things in terms of making sure the proper documentation is there, but it's been pretty efficient. As far as settlement values, I don't believe that settlement values have really been impacted. I believe that the attorneys that work the cases are going to work the cases the way they need to be worked, and the value of the case has been there. I think that out of desperation, there's definitely been, a percentage of people that will accept early settlements for lower amounts because they've lost their jobs and perhaps they don't qualify for unemployment because they're undocumented and never had a social security number, or they're afraid to apply even if they have paid into the system, and so they need money. But I don't know how much different that was than from before the pandemic. So I think for the most part it's been steady.
Yeah, you brought up the last time, even the not seeing a client face to face has some effect. That that kind of percolates a question. Does that affect settlements?
It can, but I think
probably not. It's probably not as.
I think when we spoke about this last, which was 2 years ago, it was probably a lot more of an issue because people were not used to that, and you're still wary of the technology. Maybe grandma and grandpa client, they didn't really understand the FaceTime. But I think as the 2 years has passed, people are so much more used to doing business and having conversations via any sort of video conferencing platform that it's become a lot more comfortable, and I don't think it's that much of an issue as it was 2 years ago.
Sure, yeah.
Although that's not to say that it can ever replace face-to-face contact with somebody, because some people you just need to talk to face-to-face. And so, but I don't think in my practice it's been that much of an impact.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point you made about face-to-face interaction. It really got me thinking about that. I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I haven't sat. I'm not a judge, but
Yeah. Now a trial, that's a different story, right? Because dealing with your client, a person who you're probably talking on the monthly, who you're having long conversations with, especially if it's a challenging case, that you can build rapport even over a video conferencing platform. But if you're going to stick somebody in front of a judge and where you have a limited amount of time, I think that's a different story, and I think that's the debate. Some cases you don't have to put the client in front of the judge. Some you really do to make an effective case so that the judge can actually see the person, see their mobility, watch them walk into the courtroom, watch them move around, watch them with that sling or grimace, things that might not be captured in a video platform, and that's the part we need to get back to, and that I do earnestly believe will impact the value of a case, the compensability of a case. All those things will be impacted by that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Lots of changes, right? So that's my next question. Okay, like let's take out our crystal ball, and we feel we're doing a little lobbying right now, our groups, and so we've been talking to stakeholders, and we get this sense that there's going to be a reform package this year. I wasn't in the session, but I heard that there was some legislative discussion. But even without legislation, I mean, we have some things that could hit us that are pretty significant. I mean, universal health care comes to mind, and maybe that's 20 years down the road. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think are some major changes, good or bad, for the industry?
Well, it's funny. I think one of the things they've been talking about is the single MPN. And right now we have all these different medical provider networks, and there's been some talk about just instituting one statewide MPN. I like the idea of that. I don't think the carriers will go for it, but that's very similar to a model of single payer healthcare, right? So if we had single payer healthcare, or what people refer to as universal healthcare for non-workers' comp injuries, and then for workers' comp injuries, we had a single medical provider network. I think those systems could work well with each other.
I see.
And so it's just, whether it happens or not, I would personally like to see it happen. I think it would make access to treatment better. I think there'd be less politics about which doctors are on what network or not. Just have qualified doctors that can do this, be in the network, and there'll be a lot less delays, because half my battle on a new case is trying to figure out who's the darn MPN for this particular employer, if they have an MPN, and calling and writing letters and getting delays and having to file for hearings. if everybody had the same MPN and I just knew there's a statewide MPN, I just go here, find my doctor, it would make I believe a lot more accessible for injured workers, provide benefits quicker. So that's one thing I hope to see. If you ask me what would be the biggest change, I would want that.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
But what do you think is realistic? Like we've heard CT is on the chopping block.
I've heard that too, and I believe they've been talking about that since I got into the industry. And there's a lot of play by that, but I don't think that that's a realistic thing either, because you can't. I think they might be able to modify things, but at the end of the day, you either have a specific injury or you have a repetitive injury, and some people are going to have repetitive injuries, and that's a CT. How do you get rid of that? There's no other. You're just basically saying somebody's not going to be able to get. I don't know what they're saying, to be honest, when they say it's on the chopping block, because it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, what I've heard was that they could do a time limitation. So after post-term, a year to file or something like that.
Yeah, well, we kind of already have that though, right? I mean, if you've been terminated, you didn't report anything, and you don't come back within the year, there's already parts of the labor code that address that. I think they want to be a lot more strict about it, and maybe perhaps get rid of the knowledge aspect of it, because a lot of this depends on whether the injured worker had knowledge of disability and whether there was actual disability or not, and disability being defined as wage loss or some sort of benefit being paid. So, they can talk about it, but I don't think that's a realistic one either.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, it kind of reminds me just that enforcement is so tough in this industry.
Yeah.
We talk about MPNs, and by statute, right, they have to have their list posted on a public website.
Exactly.
And the fact that you can't find it, and it takes your time and attention to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can find it, but the average worker, they don't know where to go, and they get all this paperwork, and it's kind of buried in there with some sort of URL that's buried in there, and then on top of it, maybe they're monolingual Spanish speakers and they're not given to it in Spanish, and then on top of that, you're making an assumption that people have internet or can access this information to begin with, that they have a computer at home with internet access. I mean, those are a lot of assumptions you're making step after step after step before somebody can get access to something.
Yeah. Gosh, man. And I brought up universal health care, and I think you answered that. It was you think a single MPN and work well side by side with something.
I do. I think I don't know the statistic on this, and I wouldn't say. I would say anecdotally, I have to believe that most Western nations, from what I know, already have some sort of single payer system, at least for the last 50 years, and. With all the advances that we've had in technology and expansion of Medicaid benefits, Bernie Sanders said it, right? This is really the only long-term solution for America's healthcare crisis, and I believe that. I believe it's the only real solution. I know there's, people have been down on a lot of it for a lot of different reasons, but it just seems to me to work well in other nations that I'm familiar with. So lower administrative costs. You don't have to deal with all those enrollment issues, and fighting over this plan covers this and this plan doesn't cover this. Everybody should just have access to the same top-notch medical care. It seems common sense to me, but the pragmatics of it and the implementation of it, that's a whole different story, and I understand that. And as you said, there's going to be stakeholders who are going, this is $1 billion industry.
Yeah.
They're not going to go down without a fight,
No.
So.
No. Yep. Yeah. Interesting. I'm going to switch gears to Latino comp, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So your current president?
Well, my term ended in December.
Okay.
So now our president is Danny Isabel Jr.
Right.
And Angelina Dalrymple. I'm sorry. I believe Vanessa Henderson is our new vice president. And but I'm still there. It's a cause that I'm very involved in and grateful in, and this stepping away from being in the president role is going to allow me to focus more on other committees, whether membership or education, where I can use, the things that I've learned to grow the organization and to provide that top quality education that people want, as well as all the fun events, right? So it's going to be nice to be part of that. But it's an important organization because it's unlike any other organization in California insofar that we bring together all the stakeholders and we give every stakeholder a voice. That's why we're not a bar association. That was the vision. So we can, if you're a workers' comp practitioner and you're not involved in our organization, then you're missing out.
Sure.
You're missing out because the people that are helping shape and make decisions and in our advocacy, not only in our advocacy legislatively, but in our advocacy in terms of what workers' comp is, you should have a voice in that if this is your business, if this is what you do.
It's a community.
It's a community, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not, and of course, you know me. I mean, I'm a huge fan, just because I'm going and I'm speaking to stakeholders for our association, for our copy service association, and that has some value for the community.
Absolutely. I mean, you provide a service, and I think we've talked about this before. And on behalf of Latino Comp, I'm going to say you've been a great supporter, and we really appreciate everything that Gemini does to support the organization over the years. And so, but at the same time, we hope that you've gained value by it, by getting to know the lawyers and the providers and the other people, because oftentimes we get a little bit of tunnel vision and we're caught up in our own problems and we don't necessarily realize the problems of stakeholders like Gemini. What does it mean when they pass legislation regarding how much you can bill or not? What does that mean for the services you can provide for us, which in turn are for our injured workers, And we can't just take this blind eye view that's Gemini's problem, not really our problem. It is. It's all of our problems, And so
it's a ripple effect.
It's a ripple effect, and so we have to stand with each other to make sure that we're doing what's intended, right? And I believe I said this last time. Judge Casey said it right now. This is a benefit delivery system, and if we're not doing what we need to do to advocate and make sure that the regs and the laws are just and fair, there's not going to be a lot to deliver.
So. and I think that what you guys have done, honestly, in the last couple of years is just significant when it comes to the community aspect. And so what's next? You talk about, I heard you talk about education as one of the maybe things that Latino Comp should be focusing on.
So what's next, and what I'd like to see happen next is as we continue our growth and expanding into areas that we traditionally have not been taken advantage of in terms of membership. So we've done with the help of people like Colleen Moraga and Juan Spencer. We're able to do a great expansion and movement up north into the Bay Area and Sacramento, and now we're taking those same things with our people as we try to move into San Diego and Orange County, where there's a lot of attorneys, a lot of representation, but Latino Comp hasn't quite got there, so that we can really be a force in terms of our policy. At this point, we've had, I can say that we've had, politicians and commissioners reach out to us and ask us for endorsements. That they want our organization to endorse them. That says something to me. That says that what we have to say matters, and that what our endorsement brings a weight in the community that has an impact. So as we grow our membership, that's even going to be more. I don't know if that, we've talked about things like having a PAC. We've talked about those kind of things, but at the end of the day, we need bodies, right? Because it's the same. You've been part of an organization, right? It's always the same 15, 20 people that are doing all the work.
You guys should. I mean, you're right, though, and the strategy has been, I think, rock solid. Okay, build the community. Okay, next step, education, but then you have legislative advocacy.
Absolutely, and we have Jair De La Torre and Bernardo De La Torre very involved with that, working hand in hand, and legislative days, and trying to reach out to our other partners, whether it's the Mexican American Bar Association or other organizations, as we throw our weight around a little bit. And I think as we grow and as our membership grows, as we get stronger, as we build that community, then we're going to have even more of an impact.
Gotcha. I get that. That makes sense. So when it comes to the policy making, and we're Bernardo and Jair, great folks. I mean, when do you need to get a lobbyist? When is that necessary?
Exactly. That's a great question. That's something we've talked about, and as we focus that. So I can't say that we've gotten to that stage, but this year under Danny's leadership, I'm hoping that we start seeing a movement into creating that niche that we're going to need. But those things cost dollars, and so the dollars come from members. And so we want to grow our members. In fact, I'm thinking as we're here, probably would be a good idea for us to have our own booth, maybe at the summer convention, and recruit some people. So that would be good. But I think people hear about our organization. Mm-hmm. They, it's not. They know we're there, and the big question is often, do I have to be Latino to be in Latino Club?
Yeah.
No, you do not.
That was gonna be my hardball question, man. What if
we're all Latino. We're all brothers and sisters.
I like that.
Todos hermanos y hermanas,
I love that.
right?
That's right. That is right.
So we do not look beyond that. That's just we look beyond that. This is where our organization stems in its origin, and obviously it's important because it's an identity that we have, and the reality is that the majority of the injured workers are Latinos in the state of California, and so there's a voice that needs to be there, but we do not limit on race, creed, religion, and all those other things. If you have an interest in being part of our organization, doing something positive for injured workers, and moving along what the purpose of workers' compensation is, then we want you to be part of our organization.
But so is it part of the vision to generalize the name?
What do you mean by generalize the name?
So Latino Comp, on first blush, seeing, it can be interpreted as exclusive.
Right.
So.
No, I understand. Here's the thing, and I'm going to premise this by saying these are my opinions. I do not represent the opinions of Latino Comp or their leadership or anything like that. I can only speak for myself and the opinions of John Hernandez.
That means I asked a good question.
Yeah, you did ask a good question because it's my for me, the name is the identity and the roots of what we've tried to establish. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that people should be excluded or that we need to somehow morph into something that's more perhaps politically correct or more inclusive. It is what it is. This organization was started by Latino attorneys for the purpose of ensuring and delivering the benefits for Latino workers. But we understand that we are part of just a community that's just not Latino workers, and it's not just, Latinos that are servicing other Latinos, right? So in it, while that will remain our identity, and I would promote that our cultural identity, that's just part of being proud of where we're coming from.
Sure, yeah.
But everybody, all of our stakeholders are in it for the same thing, which is advancing, promoting, and making better the practice of workers' compensation in the state of California.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Got it. So we can't answer then. The name is the name is going to be addressed.
The name is staying.
The name is staying. Okay, it's John's opinion, but the name is staying.
Yeah. It's up there with John's opinion that don't call me Latinx either. So that's another. Okay. That's another
John's
controversial
opinion.
one.
We like John's opinion.
That's John's opinion.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, what do you think industry topics are most needed for education right now?
So I think as we move into 2022, always apportionment's always a big deal. MPN litigation is always a big deal because that's really what we do. Even though workers' comp is not law in motion, they're administrative regs. We're not supposed to be taking up the court's time just dealing with, law in motion issues and discovery issues. It happens a lot. Probably far more in Southern California than Northern California for that reason. But apportionment is something that really, really impacts our clients. And that kind of education is important in not only our lawyer members, but our doctor members, And discovery plans, I think about what can we do or can't do in terms of how we litigate our cases. And I'll give you an example. Somebody was asking me recently, if the defense attorney subpoenaed records X, Y, and Z, then that means I can't subpoena the same records because they've already subpoenaed them. And you're shaking your head, but this is like a legit question from a 10, 15 year lawyer. And I'm like, that's not how it works. So even things like that, we still need education on what can you do and what you can't do. So those are in-house administrative law practice things, and I think that's one thing we haven't been doing enough of.
Gotcha.
We definitely do the education on the law, the new case update. I know that the next panel I'm on is going to be the recap of CAAA, right? So I'm gonna, for the people who didn't come, I'm going to present, like, these are the big things that we learned. But one of the things I do want to see is more law practice management, where we can use our partners like Gemini to come in and say, hey, these are things that you guys deal with in your office, subpoenaing records. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. We're not in here to talk about how Gemini gets paid or whether they get paid or not. That's your business, right? But what can we do? And why do we need those records, and what happens, and what does that look like? I mean, I know that I click a button somewhere, or I tell somebody, go get these records. I don't really understand what that means, other than I know, Dan Mora has some guy or some lady that's going to go out somewhere with a machine, I assume, and make copies of this. And what does that mean, and when can I get my own? So I think technology, solo practitioner issues, law and practice are things that I want to see, especially with the younger attorneys that have been at firms or are now venturing on their own. I just think that's helpful. And I would have wanted to learn that, because I can do that. I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could subpoena records if somebody else had subpoenaed. I didn't know I was entitled to that. I didn't know that, this is what it meant, and so things like that are going to be very important.
That's awesome, man. And that's exciting for me to hear. It is it just goes back to that community. All the details are important, and all the stakeholders.
Every detail is important, exactly, right?
Final question, I'll let you go. So, injured worker, a positive injured worker story.
Oh man, I've been fortunate that I've had some really, really good stories. Although I did have my favorite. And my favorite was I had a gentleman who worked for a company and had checked out of work and was driving home. And as he was driving home, had a car accident, unfortunately. And he was banged up, but thank God he's recovered well. But it was just an interesting and fun trial, because the carrier had denied it, but the guy was driving a fully branded vehicle. And so it was fully branded with the company, the name of the company he worked for. And so our entire thing was, he's a driving billboard. It's work every time he drives that car. And they had given him permission to drive it even on his personal time. And why would you do that other than you want somebody driving around the billboard of your company? So we were able to win that trial. Judge agreed with us, and my client got benefits, and it really helped out because he's actually a single dad. Young kids, hadn't worked, and so it was nice to see him find that relief in the system, that the system did work for him.
Nice.
And that he was able to get the medical care and the treatment. It was a case that came to us from a personal injury attorney who declined it because there was no insurance on either end. But those are the kind of stories you fight. You get a good outcome, and then you have a happy client who otherwise may have not had anything. No health, especially when they don't have health care as an option. And so it's interesting. But
being out of work is devastating.
No, it was great. We had the manager of the company was actually based out of North Carolina.
Okay.
And I was asking him some questions, and he said on the record, he's like, I have no idea what California's laws are. So I was like, all right, you
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you very much, sir. That's enough questions for you. But no, it was a good story. But we're lucky and fortunate to have those. funny enough, Dan, those are not the ones that I reminisce on.
Yeah.
The ones that I reminisce.
Oh, I wanted to end on a positive note.
Yeah.
This you could. I mean, that's like we talked about. The fight is. I mean, that's what gets me up. Right. Is doing right for the wrong.
And I love hearing other people's stories. You know, when I see other people and their successes, it's just great because at the end of the day,
what keeps you up at night is those ones that you just can't get over the finish line. Yeah. Or you know they're sitting at home struggling.
You're sitting at home. And what can you do to improve this person's life?
Right.
You know? So, but I'm happy that I can do something.
That's true. Yeah.
And I'm happy that there are people. Look at all these people here that have the same vision and thoughts that I do, who just want to advocate and do good. And, that's a wonderful community to be part of.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thanks, John, for being part of this. Really appreciate it. Great talking to you again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Anytime. Thank you again for all your support, for everything you do in the community. For your support of Latino Comp, not just Latino Comp, but I know you're out there advocating and doing what, getting yourself out there. So we really appreciate you and Gemini and everything that you do. And I, definitely want to say I appreciate your friendship. So thank you.
You got it, man. Yeah.
Okay.
And nice talking to you, man.
You too.
Take care.
Take care.